you come at this from experience because you spend a lot of time in corporate America. A lot of times when you talk to consultants, they'll tell you 100 different ways to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, but they ain't got one. That's not true of you. You've been there. You've done this. Where have you worked in the past?
I always thought I would be a corporate girl. I can't even believe I'm sitting here today saying I'm an entrepreneur. I always thought it would just be my plan. So I've worked in dating. I used to work in a dating service. I've worked for Harley Davidson motorcycles. I'm not a biker chick by any means, but I worked for Harley for a while. And my last corporate job was with peak performance coach Tony Robbins, where I was the director of content development. I've been in so many different jobs though. And I always thought I was a really good corporate girl, climbing that corporate ladder and wanting to get all the awards and the promotions. And I always thought that's where I'd be.
What caused you to make the jump? Because as you said, that was your path, what you envisioned. Yeah. But then all of a sudden, something triggered you where you said, no, not going to do this anymore.
Yes, it was actually a very specific moment in time. So I was working for Tony for about 6 years and I was getting paid well. I got to travel. I was a director, so I had a team around me. And on paper, it was a really good job. I had also just gotten married and was traveling all the time, never was seeing my husband and never was at home. But here's what happened. Tony decided to do a focus group of some type, and he brought in a bunch of online business owners. Now, they needed someone to take notes for the meeting. So this is very humbling. I was brought in to take notes. I sat at a side table and all these guys came in. They were all men. And they sat at this big oak table in our offices in San Diego, California. And Tony said, guys, tell me about your businesses, because Tony was getting more into the online space. So they went around and they talked about what they did. Now, these guys were in all these different areas like real estate, relationship building, investing, so many different markets, but they all talked about freedom. They were working when they wanted, where they wanted, how they wanted. They were busting through any glass ceiling, although it was like beyond anything I've ever heard about the kind of money they were making and the kind of impact they were making. And I realized for the first time in my life, I have never been free. And so I took the worst notes of my life that day because I just wanted to hear what they were saying. I didn't really understand what they were doing, but I did understand they had a lifestyle of freedom. I did understand they were making a lot of good money and a lot of good impact. And for the first time, I looked back at my life and I thought, I've always had a boss. My first boss was my dad. He was very strict, his way or the highway. So I grew up with this dad that was essentially my boss. Then I get into the corporate world. I've always had bosses. I've never, ever called the shots. And so that was that turning point that I thought, I don't know what these guys are doing, but I'm going to figure this out. I need to be my own boss.
And did you decide at the time that there was something to being your own boss that you pick up somewhere that had not been shared with you? Because saying you want to be your own boss and then having the skills, the abilities, the support systems, the intuitions, the insights, the understandings to actually be your own boss are two very different things. Everybody wants to be their own boss, but being able to do it successfully are two very different things.
In that moment, if you put me back into that meeting, I had no idea how to be my own boss. And I sure as heck didn't have the confidence to do so. I had done well in corporate and I wasn't a vice president or a big shot over there, but I had done well enough. So yeah, in that moment, no, I did not know how I was going to do this, nor did I really believe that I was capable. But here's why I know that I had to figure out how to make it work. I just wanted something more so than I wanted security or comfort. And I really, looking back, I've thought about this a lot. I was secure in that job, regular paycheck, paid vacations, good job. Security was important to me, but in that moment, for the first time, something else was more important than security or comfort. So I was bound and determined to figure out how to be my own boss.
You know, when I've talked to people over the last 45 or 50 years, they describe what you're talking about as a comfort zone. They say, I do have the security. It may not be everything I want. I may not have all the lofty things I want. I may not have time with family that I want. I may not have the nicest house that I want. I may not have the creative license I want. Whatever currency they're lacking, And I think there are lots of different kinds of currency. There's monetary currency, freedom currency, spiritual currency, emotional currency, lots of currency. But they always say that it's getting out of the comfort zone, taking that risk that keeps them settling for what they don't want instead of reaching for what they do want. And it sounds to me like you're saying that the pain of staying where you were was worse than the pain that you imagined if you reached for something, even if you failed.
At the moment, if you asked me, Amy, this was 15 years ago, were you prepared to fail? I'd probably say, oh gosh, Dr. Phil, I don't know. That's like a big question. I don't know if I was ready in that moment, but I did know that what was keeping me safe was keeping me stuck. I just knew that there was something in that moment. I thought, I'm watching these guys, and if these guys can do it, there was a tiny little courage voice inside me thought, if these guys can do it, I can figure this out. Like, come on, there's got to be a way. And so when I realized, wait a second, I feel stuck. I never see my husband. I'm always on the road. I've hit a glass ceiling. I know I can make more money than what I'm going to make here. There's got to be another way. So I think it was this desire for something more that I thought, okay, I'm willing to take a risk. Now, here's the thing. The reason I wrote the book 2 weeks notice is I don't think that some woman in a 9-to-5 job is going to have a moment like, you know what? I got to be my own boss. Let's go. And she gives her 2 weeks notice tomorrow. That's not how it happens. What I had to do is I had to build a runway. And I talk about this in the book where there were things that I had to make calculated moves in order to be ready. It took me a full year from that fateful meeting to actually driving out of those San Diego offices in my little white car with my back of my car packed with all my boxes from my office and drive out into the sunset. It took me a full year, and I did it scared. Like, I did not do it fully confident. But again, I think the pain of staying was bigger than the comfort of being there. And so I think that is something that anybody listening right now, ask yourself, what do you want? I think the reason we stay stuck is we don't even know what we want. What do you want? I didn't want to be told what to do, when to do, or how to do it anymore. I didn't want to be on someone else's time or someone else's dime. I didn't want to be bossed around anymore. It was like finally hit me. And that kind of energy, that kind of like fierceness in me, it took a little while to me to get the courage to leave. But I really do think we have to kind of dig that up.